everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Atheist Experience Live. I'm your host, Matt Dillhunty. As you know, because it popped up twice on the introduction, one of those was actually supposed to announce that we have Nick Lee as a guest on the show today, and we'll get into more of that in just a minute. And Martin Wagner is back in preparation to go off and be our roving reporter at the amazing meeting.
TAM9 from outer space, yes.
Awesome.
Yeah,
so, because we got a guest, we've already got phone lines full, I want to get through the announcements really quick. This is the Atheist Experience. We're coming to you live from Austin, Texas on public access TV and streaming over the internet. You can find out more information about the show at www.atheist-experience.com. And we're sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. And you can find out more about the ACA at www.atheist-community.org. If you do not get through on the telephone today, or if you don't want to and you want to give us some feedback, you can email tv at atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, the co-hosts, the people behind the scenes who actually do the real work to make the show happen. And we cannot possibly answer all of them, but we do our best to read all of them and take any feedback into consideration. Also, for those of you who've been kind of following what's been going on in the blog world, I was a part of a team of bloggers who went head-to-head with PZ Myers, the overlord of atheist bloggers, in a competition to see who could raise the most money for Camp Quest. And we won. And because of that, or as part of our bargain to get people to donate on our behalf, each of the various bloggers and personalities agreed to do something. Greta Christina is going to be singing karaoke. I think JT's waxing his legs. Jen's going to learn to ride a bike. Jen McCrite, that is. And I agreed to do an episode of the TV show in drag. For the people who've been asking when that's going to happen, it's next Sunday. Not only have we run out to get my other ear pierced so that I can wear proper jewelry, but there's nair involved and trips to a salon and dresses and wigs and the whole 9 yards. So tune in next week, and it'll be just an absolutely normal show, except that I'll be in drag. So, in addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a weekly internet audio podcast that ends up being more bi-weekly. That's the Nonprofits. You can go to nonprofitsradio.com for more information. That's PROPHETS. And that's it for the announcements, except for one, and that's that after the show's over, we get together for dinner at El Arroyo. They'll put the address up on the screen. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come to any of our events. You don't have to be a member. They'll have the phone number posted up, although the lines are currently full, and we'll get to callers in a little while. But since we've got an in-studio guest, which doesn't happen too often, everybody please welcome Nick Lee, current president. Thanks. Yay. Studio audience. Hey. You are currently president of Atheist Alliance America now.
That's correct.
And you've had about 15 important positions just prior to this, which were all similar. So why don't you...
Climbing the corporate ladder, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I began as the president of the Freethinkers Association of Central Texas, based out of San Antonio. And I moved into that organization. We worked with that for a few years and began to build the membership and so on. And then during that time, I met up with someone who wanted to put on conventions within Texas, Paul Mitchell. And he has successfully done that. We formed a nonprofit. I became his vice president in that, and we've put on 3 very successful Texas Freethought conventions in the state of Texas. Amazing growth considering the environment we live in. And then last year, in October of 2010, I made the mistake of going to the Atheist Alliance International Convention in Montreal, where I got elected president.
Bummer.
So that's, and at the same time, there was a motion passed to split that function into the international arm and the domestic arm, and I chose to remain with the domestic arm, but we have been working for the last 10 months or so on making that transition happen. And the new AAI launched at the Dublin Convention, which I'm sure you've seen plenty of videos on the YouTube from that convention. So they're up and running with a new set of officers, newly elected in June of this year. Meanwhile, I'm reconstructing, putting back together the domestic operation, all of the affiliates that are in the U.S.
And so you're in the process of revamping the website,
yes,
and a bunch of other things. There's a convention coming up in October.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
I am too. It's one of my favorite things to do every year.
Yes. So this year, this will be in effect, the first convention for the Atheist Alliance of America, and we were doing it in conjunction with the Texas Freethought Convention. So we'll be holding it in Houston, Texas, on October 7th through 9th, and we have an all-star lineup of speakers there. We can go through the whole list if we have time. Dawkins will be there, Shermer will be there, P.Z. Meyer, Victor Stenger, Elizabeth Cornwell, and many, many more. So that's going to be a bang-up convention. We're still working on the refinements of the schedule for that and slotting all of the prime speakers in the right place, and we're still working on the pricing. So we haven't yet opened registration. The registration, I think, is going to be quite reasonable considering the lineup of people that we have, and we've negotiated a fair rate with the hotel for the reservations there. As soon as we can get that up and running, we'll have a link on our website at www.Atheist Alliance of America or Atheist Alliance America. I understand both of them work, .org. We'll have a link there that will lead you to the software that you can register, and also to the hotel where they'll have the reservation software set up for us with our discount.
Cool. Let's talk a little bit about what your plans are for Atheist Alliance America, because I've talked a number of times about how a lot of the major organizations tend to work top-down, and we're here as a smaller local organization. We've done some of the groundwork that other organizations might want to do, so there's now, in addition to the Atheist Community of Austin, there's one in Tulsa, which I'll be speaking at the end of the month, and I think Topeka and maybe Montreal and some other places. So we had kind of stumbled across this idea of kind of working ground up. And we're associated with a number of organizations, including Atheist Alliance America, American Atheists, Secular Coalition for America, and everything else. What are your plans for AAA going forward as far as working with local organizations and groups?
I really want to follow through on what our original intent was. When the Atheist Alliance, period, was first formed in 1991, that was the intent. It was a democratic organization. It was an umbrella organization of local groups, and it was driven from the bottom up as a democratic organization, and each affiliate was a member of the council, of the governing council for the organization. We began picking up international members along the way, and we changed the name to Atheist Alliance International in 2002 to reflect that. Now, with our coming back to domestically, I want to pick up again on this theme of helping grow the local organizations. As you say, Matt, I'm convinced that there are several large organizations nationally who work this movement from the top down. They're interested in the national issues, and they have the resources to do that. But there's a lot to be done at the local level, and I want to emphasize that. I want to be the umbrella organization for these democratic or local groups who can do some local activities, can reach out to the community, build their organization, build their leadership, and we can help do that. Part of the way that I want to do that is with an ambassador program that will represent the Atheist Alliance of America to go out to these places that are struggling. And part of the talent pool for those ambassadors will come from places like the Atheist Community of Austin, and from a very strong group in Los Angeles, one in Sacramento, one in New York City. These people have very successful programs and very active programs that reach out to an entire community, not just a speaker series, not just working at the food bank, but a whole panoply of things that can be done. And the additional thing I want to work on is political activity within the local area. Much to be done there. We can help do that, and so we want to invite more people to build affiliates. We want to help them build. We want to draw on the talent of the existing affiliate associated people into this to help these other organizations grow and build their local activities.
So I don't know if Martin had questions as well. I was glad to hear about, working towards things like, we tend to focus on the State Board of Education because it's a mess in Texas. But there are things that people can do in their local areas with local school boards and advisory boards, things to make sure that the secular voice is being represented well across the board. We're not just a forgotten minority.
I think the advisory board in Texas, and I'm not sure how common it is in other states, but in addition to the elected school official or school board, which is pretty difficult to go through that, put your money on the line, go knocking on doors, there are advisory committees that folks can get into for each school district that will work alongside those elected officials, and you can make an impact there. That's one area that we can have an impact on education. We're all concerned about the impact, the negative impact on science education that the religious right has been able to get at because they've been working for 30 years from the ground up in local organizations. So we hope to be able to counter that. That's one area that can be done in the local community.
Yeah, I've always thought that that was probably a very necessary thing to focus on because, as you say, the reason that creationists and the Christian right have been able to move so affirmatively on such things as the State Board of Education is because, for one thing, they do have organization, they do have a group of supporters that are focused, and they look for these areas in state and local politics where there isn't a whole lot of priority given. The reason, for example, that very few people in the Democratic Party here in Texas, for example, really have paid much attention to the State Board of Education. They're all worried about the Senate and the House and the higher offices. So this allowed the Christian right to just pack its people onto the board, and suddenly you have this little committee which is not supposed to do things like make waves internationally. They're just supposed to approve things for state school-wide curriculum. Suddenly, around the world and around the globe, people are ridiculing Texas because of the antics of Don McElroy and Terry Leo and all of these creationist fanatics on the State Board of Education. And it suddenly became, there was, well, holy mackerel, there's really cause for concern here.
And now with the new chair, which is Barbara Cargill.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you don't bother following it, I highly recommend Texas Freedom Network, who they're a fabulous watchdog for not just State Board of Education issues, but religious conflicts with the legislative process in Texas. Their blog is phenomenal for getting up-to-date information, which is one of the reasons why I don't spend a lot of time on it, because they're so much better at it than we could ever be. It's their focus.
And education is only one of the areas that I think we can begin to work on, and using that same model. I mean, let's not be afraid of emulating our enemies.
Right.
They have worked for 30 years to get to this point where they are now political influence, although I happen to believe that they have reached their high watermark, that they overstepped themselves, particularly with Don McElroy and the education thing, when he was so blatant. And in many other areas.
I mean, it did become an international laughingstock.
Yes. And so then the Democratic Party, or progressives generally, and I want to make the caution here, we're talking about politics, local politics and statewide and national politics. That's fair game. Partisan politics is not. We're a 501c3. Most affiliates are 501c3. You got to be careful about endorsing particular candidates, but issue-oriented, that's fair game, and that's what we ought to be in. And we can ally ourselves with a wide group of people in doing that, including some of the faith-based community. They're not happy with this either. They're not pleased that the fundamentalists have run off and misrepresented their own position on these things. So we can ally ourselves with lots of folks on specific issues, maybe not all of them, but moving from one to the other. And I think that's how we leverage our political clout.
Right. And by having that same degree of organization and focus that the religious right has put into their efforts.
Precisely.
And it's one of those things where over the past couple of years, as this issue has heated up, it's kind of changed my perspective on things. From a personal standpoint, of course, I generally partisan, but I have worked alongside of and known people from every party, Democrat, Republican, Green, Libertarian, who side with us on church-state separation issues because it just makes sense and it should be the law. I don't know why it's not being enforced. So this isn't the kind of partisan issue. This is about there's a small but vocal and well-funded contingent of people who have basically wormed their way into little areas to promote their particular ideology, which isn't tied to any party, and would be an embarrassment to the some of the older members of the parties that they wind up with. But,
I don't know.
So,
I think the small little group of people that you talk about in the state of Texas specifically happens to be perched right at the top of the heap, right? I mean, we have a governor who's
having a special
prayer
day
rally
on
because
August 6th.
obviously the way to solve the problems of Texas is not for him to stay at home in his office working. It's to rent out a stadium.
Well,
and
I
throw
think
a
if
big
you
prayer
failed that
rally.
many times,
Yeah.
maybe there is some justification in turning it over to God.
See, that's my worry. I mean, I know that I would love to believe you that they have hit their high water mark, but I think that for some reason Texas just seems to be coated in Teflon when it comes to just, people calling the state out on this raving idiocy, and yet you have Rick Perry that is just seems to be this unstoppable juggernaut of idiocy.
But
So
hey, it's a big prayer meeting. Yes. And the cool thing is I wasn't going to go to Houston for this. Because there's already
thinking about it still.
There are already organizations down there that are planning a rally kind of protesty type thing, and it didn't make sense for me to drive over to Houston and do it. And then I found out that the Westboro Baptist Church is also going to be protesting Governor Perry. So how do you not go now? Because this is
the one time you'll see the atheists in Westboro.
I want to stand right next. I want to stand right next to Shirley Phelps and call them out for this. Because people who support free speech and church-state separation are my friends, even if they're batshit crazy in other areas. And on that note, why don't we go ahead, because we've
got some calls. We've had people being
40
very
minutes
patient.
left and everybody's on hold. We'll try and take some calls real quick. We've got Luke in North Hills, California.
Hello?
Hey, Luke, how are you?
All right, how you doing?
Good.
All right, so I have a couple of questions. My questions regard I hear feedback on the receiver.
Yeah, if you're streaming or something, you're going to want to turn it down.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, it's on my screen. I have it all the way off, so...
Okay.
Oh, and anyway, I'm going to try to talk about what you brought up on Father's Day, on Dan Patrick and the abortion issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of interested by what you proposed was to show that Dan Patrick doesn't really believe what he says he believes.
Yeah, you're probably gonna want to email the TV at list and specifically talk to Don about the points you raised, but I'll happily address whatever question I can.
Okay, well, it was kind of implied that because God killed people or caused abortion or killed his son, that means God is actually for abortion. So does that mean Christianity is pro-abortion?
Well, I don't know that that's necessarily the case, and I'm not here to kind of interpret individual views on Christianity.
You'll ask Don.
My thing is that for the Christians who there are Christians who would say that the Bible is opposed to abortion. I think they are on incredibly flimsy grounds, and quite frankly, it doesn't matter to me what the Bible says, but it does to them. And when they tend to make their argument, I think it's on flimsy grounds, because there are other Christians who would argue that the Bible doesn't explicitly say anything in opposition to abortion. And as Don pointed out, if you look at the story of the Jewish and Christian God as if it were true, you have a God who supposedly specifically instructed people to run around slaughtering anybody who wasn't part of God's chosen group. And there's passages in there that talk about, running the pregnant women through with a sword. Now, obviously...
But save the virgins.
Yes, but save the virgins.
For yourselves.
And obviously that's not identical to today's modern abortion. But the point is that he doesn't seem to have any qualms in that story about killing off the unborn. And if you look at what Jewish law has to say about when an unborn fetus becomes an actual person and gets counted with regard to census, it has nothing to, it's nowhere near conception. It's actually after it's born. So, I mean, our modern laws that limit abortion in the United States are actually more strict than what would be the ancient Israelites' view on when somebody becomes a person.
So, basically, Christianity doesn't have a view on abortion.
Well, Christianity probably does, and any number of denominations. My thing is that if Christianity is based on the Bible doesn't have a clear, concise position on abortion. And the verses that most Christians I've talked to tend to appeal to don't make any sense in the context of abortion. And there's plenty of verses that you can go to that would counter their argument. It's the same thing with almost any issue you can come up with. You can make the Bible support whichever side or position you want, with a few exceptions.
So Christianity doesn't have any universal doctrine that could unite them, so you can criticize?
No.
Not on the abortion issue.
There's not a universal doctrine. You realize there's well over 1,000 denominations that identify as Christian, and they disagree on every single point of doctrine, including whether or not Jesus was God. And yet they still identify with this label, or whether or not Jesus existed as a human, or a half human, or both human. There are groups that don't accept the Trinity. Every single point of doctrine is going to be challenged by one of these groups or another. It's a complete mishmash, and they're all using the same label, and it's not my job to sort them out. If you've got some orthodox view and you depart from it, you should probably change your name, because all you're doing is confusing things by keeping the old one. I mean, if there's a group of atheists who decide we believe in this particular God but not all the others, and they run around still using the atheist label, I'm probably going to complain a little bit, because they're not representing,
not getting it, yeah,
what atheism is. I mean, and we don't even have any dogma or doctrine or anything.
Mm-hmm. You know, what's always struck me, if I remember correctly, some 60% of fertilized eggs are spontaneously aborted. That makes God the biggest abortionist of all time.
Yeah, if your belief system includes the idea that God is governing every little thing that happens everywhere, right down to the atomic level, then yeah, in that context, it would be. Mm-hmm. Do you have anything else, Luke?
Yeah, because I heard a lot, but I'm not sure anything answered my question. Because it seems that you still want to point out that Christianity is contradictory, but to itself, or the Christians actually represent something that's contrary to what they believe. But you say there's no actual doctrine that Christians can be identified with.
Well, Christianity isn't one thing. That's my point. It's many different things to many different people. There's confusion over that label. So if you're really looking for an answer, you're going to have to refine it a little further, because I can tell you that the Southern Baptist Convention, as a segment of the Christian population, have as their church's organizational doctrine an issue about when life begins, and they are therefore in opposition to abortion.
But since Christianity doesn't have any unified doctrine, how can you criticize them?
Well, I criticize them because they're wrong, and because they're silly, because they're making appeals to a book. Which nobody should care what the book has to say. And I would criticize the fact that they're running around saying many conflicting things while all adopting the same label in the same book and pointing at each other going, no, 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 you're not the true Christian, I am. To me, it's just kind of absurd. Because when we're talking about whether or not something is morally correct or not, I have no interest at all in what any old book or any old people or any old God has to say. It's based on other things entirely. So I'm not really sure what you're wanting me to say.
Well, it doesn't seem to be that you have, no one can really be identified as a Christian, and so there's nothing to really criticize.
I'm sorry?
Well, since Christianity can be anything to anyone, then how can you criticize anyone when they're Christian? Because if they're saying one thing, they could actually mean something contrary.
Well,
so
you could criticize them on that basis, that there is a fundamental incoherence to the belief system. If a particular Christian says, for example, that I am against X, and X can be abortion, and they cite the Bible as their reason for this, or they cite God's law or God's will or anything to do with God, you can ask them, all right, can you please show me where it says this in your scripture? And they'll either show you something that they think fits or doesn't. You can find, then, other denominations and other sects of Christianity who will say, no, that particular group, that person over there, is misinterpreting the Bible. God doesn't say that about this issue. He says this. So, instead, far from having no basis to criticize Christians and Christianity, in point of fact, what you're bringing up is one of the most salient criticisms of the belief system, which is that if this really is one truth, why are there so many different groups of you? And why can no one come to terms?
And for clarity, because I think I kind of understand, what you're getting at, I would say that if Christianity as a label is to have any value, and by that I mean every label is there as a tool in language to communicate information. And so there must be some minimum set of things that qualify as Christian. I don't know that abortion is necessarily one of them. Mm-hmm. The idea that, for example, there is a God and that Jesus is somehow involved in this picture, those types of things would be minimal, part of the minimal set of items that we would consider Christianity. But I don't get to define what Christianity is because I haven't been one for a decade.
So no one can clarify, no one can define what Christianity is.
Oh, plenty of people can offer their definitions, but there's not any unified definition that necessarily speaks for all Christians.
So,
well, I guess I've already answered my question. Thank you for your time.
Sure.
Thanks for calling, Luke.
As a reminder, we got about a half hour or so left in our much shortened show, which may be lengthening, we don't know. There may be changes coming. We're still kind of in flux on a lot of things. But after it's over, we get together for dinner at El Arroyo. They'll put the address up on the screen right there, 1624 West 5th Street, 5th and Campbell. And any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to join us. Yeah, I'm not sure I know exactly what he was looking for. Was he trying to get me to define Christianity so that he could knock down that straw man?
He was saying you were in no position to criticize them for that position that they take. He didn't understand apparently the variety of folks.
Yeah, I think that he was trying to get at what our basis would be for having a criticism.
Yeah. It's the reason.
And I say that's what I tried to explain.
It's the reason why one of the most common things I've tried to do on the show is instead of I don't first of all assume to represent Christianity very often, except when we're talking about something specific, and then I'll try to make sure I'm very clear about what I'm talking about. But also, when somebody calls in, I tend to ask them what they believe and why, and I don't care what label they attribute to it, because we're talking about what they believe and why, and I don't care if they identify as a Christian or a Baptist or Catholic or a Hindu or whatever. It's not up to me to define what is or isn't a true Christian. I wish one of them would, and maybe they could get some consensus on it and swap some labels around, because it'd be a lot easier, because then I could say, oh yes, now that we have a good definition of Christians, obviously they're, right on this issue and wrong on this issue, or I agree with them on this issue and I disagree on this issue. And this other group over here, which we're now going to call Christianity B, they're more correct or less correct in the different areas. But that doesn't happen. It's wishful thinking to think that it's likely to after this long, because the trend is towards an increased diversity in that definition. Every day that goes by, every new person who identifies as a Christian invents a new version of Christianity for themselves. It may be very similar to the person sitting next to them in the pew, but there's going to be differences, because people tend to think that their God agrees with them. And as long as they think that, there's a new version of Christianity every time somebody adopts it.
Well, when you create God in your own image, that tends to come with the territory.
Yes. A very highly personalized God. Tailor-made.
So we got Josh and Georgia, you there?
Yeah. I'm
hey,
here.
Thanks for waiting.
No problem. I'm a big fan of the show. Thanks for having me on.
Sure.
I wanted to get y'all's opinion on In God We Trust, not necessarily on the currency, but on the coins, which it's been there since 1864,
sure.
when Abraham Lincoln was president.
Yeah.
And I just want to know y'all's opinion on that. I know people sometimes try to say that we're a Christian nation and we appeal back to In God We Trust on the currency, but and I can tell them, or in the Pledge of Allegiance, and I can tell them that was only been there since about the 50s. But I look here at the on the coins, and they've been there a lot longer.
Sure. The issue is that it was on the coins a long time ago, along with a lot of other slogans, but it was never anything official or required. It was in the 50s, in the McCarthy era, that we adopted In God We Trust as the national motto, and that required it on all currency from that point on.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
And beforehand, the motto had been E pluribus unum. So yeah, the the 1800s, it was a very, very religious time, of course. Now but that doesn't mean what the Christians think it means when they talk about America as a Christian nation. Our forefathers, however religious they may have been, some were deists, some were Christians, some were from various faith traditions, still understood as devout, in fact, because they were as devout as they were in many of their beliefs, that this is not a thing government should stick its nose into. Because they had come from Europe and England and overseas, and where they saw what happened when churches and kings got together and everything went crazy. So they wanted something that, no, this is going to be a people's government. This is going to be a people's nation.
Okay.
But it didn't mean that they necessarily objected to, they talked about God all the time, right? They all had their own beliefs, but they did not think that, but they didn't believe in theocracy for America.
Yeah, if you're talking to somebody who's actually making the argument that this is a Christian nation because it says in God we trust on our money, you're talking to somebody who has the first clue, doesn't have the first clue what they're talking about, because it didn't occur on all currency until the 50s, and even if it did occur on coins in the 1800s, that wasn't when our nation was founded, and it doesn't matter in any respect what individuals did afterwards that may or may not have been constitutional. The Constitution is godless, explicitly so. The only mention of a god or religion outside of the tradition of putting the date, in the year of our Lord, whatever, is an explicit provision that no religious test will ever be required for any public office or trust. And in the amendments, the very first one is the one that guarantees not only the religious liberty that we all make use of by not believing, but also ensuring that the government cannot do anything that is an endorsement of religion, that establishes a preferred religion, that religion and irreligion have to be treated identically. It should be a hands-off process, and you can go back to quotes from Madison in particular, who explicitly said that the only valid interaction of the government with any religion was to settle disputes between religions that related to the public interest, when they're in conflict over a property that they both want type thing. Other than that, it should be hands-off. It's a secular nation.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And take a Theist call. Goodbye.
I'll try. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah.
I think the first call was a Theist call. He just didn't get the answer that he was hoping for, which I really wish he would have, because it would have been nice to kind of carry on that conversation a bit further.
He should email in and ask on. Yeah, definitely.
Hey, look who's calling me in the middle of the show. It's Paul Mitchell from the Texas Freethought Convention.
Oh, don't take that call.
I'm declining it because Paul and I can talk about it later. Let's, Jamie in Kingsport, how are you? Oh,
hello.
Turn down whatever you've got.
You're feeding back big time.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Better.
how you doing?
Okay, yeah, I was in the Army. I was a chaplain assistant. I started going to seminary at Liberty, where Jerry Falwell was the president of. And I've got a question about, since I was a chaplain assistant, what's your view on humanist atheist chaplains in the military?
Nick, do you have a view on human atheist chaplains in there?
That seems like an oxymoron to me. I think that there are humanist practitioners that can offer guidance and assistance. It's almost like a social work thing, which is in large part what pastors do when they talk about helping their flock with social problems, personal problems, and that sort of thing. Much of it is non-religious based, and humanists can do that same thing without a reference to a higher power or a higher being that's going to solve all the problems for them. In that sense, then there probably should be an alternative for people who are non-believers, who just want somebody to go in and talk to in a quiet room someplace and complain about their commanding officer.
Sure.
But the whole idea of having a religious representative there on our tax roll, our tax dollars, to offer religious instruction to soldiers, it sticks in my craw from the very beginning, just as a basic separation of church and state thing. And yet it has a long history. We've been doing this since the Revolutionary War. The Revolutionary Army had chaplains in it, although in large part for a long time they were kind of volunteer type things. They agreed to come in and help these folks, help the soldiers over these issues, moral and ethical issues. But then at some point it got institutionalized, and our concern now is that in a large part the the chaplain corps has drawn from the religious fundamentalist right version of Christianity. They're not fully representative of the full panoply. They do get instruction. They're told that they have to provide service to all manner of folks, of soldiers, but clearly their bias is with that religious fundamental, because that's where
they're
coming
definitely
from.
proselytizing, and a lot of chaplains can't admit that they're proselytizing.
Yeah.
But that's what they're doing. They're trying to save souls ultimately, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, among the fundamentalists, it's almost impossible for them to not proselytize, so they don't even recognize it when they're doing it.
Yeah.
My take on the chaplaincy is very similar to Nick's, although I have some subtle differences. And one is, as long as we're operating a voluntary military, we have to provide all of the services to those people that they would normally get if we're sending them out away from home. And for religious people, I think we have an obligation to at least provide them the option of counseling with a religious member. However, since we offer religions this huge break of making them tax-free, I think they should go back to being voluntary and sponsored by churches. But I think the biggest issue that we have to address first is to seriously, dramatically reduce the scope of the chaplaincy so that they are dealing only with those people who specifically request them and only on issues that are related to that individual's religion. We need qualified, trained psychologists and counselors to deal with people and available to the people who'd rather not go in and talk to a priest about what's going on.
So the big like Billy Graham, I was part of the Franklin Graham Crusade as a counselor and all that. Several chaplain assistants were. So that kind of stuff out. Or
Yes. And any requirement from anyone to any service member that they must attend a religious service, that has to end yesterday. That has to end even faster than don't ask, don't tell. Because you should never be able to... You've got this... The military is different, very different, because you have people who are in subordinate roles, who are expected to follow the instructions of the people superior to them automatically, without question, except, when they're given orders that are illegal. Because lives depend on it, and you build this camaraderie, and I was in for 8.5 years. I loved it. I recommend it, especially for somebody who isn't sure what they're going to do and may not have the direction or the funds to do it. It provides a good opportunity to grow and learn things, but it's not, things don't operate the way they do in the regular civilian world. And as long as that's the case, you have to take extra steps to make sure that you are not explicitly or implicitly demanding that somebody attend religious services or possibly punishing them for not doing it. Because I knew guys...
Extra cleaning.
Yeah, I knew guys who got stuck cleaning the barracks because they didn't want to go to service. And so, of course, everybody ended up going to a church service, especially in boot camp, because who would rather clean the toilets? I mean, that has to end. And the first step in that is to dramatically reduce the scope of the chaplaincy and to add in secular counselors who are trained to deal with everybody. And those people can direct the religious people who want to speak to a religious counselor to the chaplaincy. There needs to be a front, like, firewall in front of the chaplaincy.
Do you think it's uninformed atheists who think that religious chaplains should be removed completely out of the military? Like no chaplains at all? Like handle it with
I don't know. I can't obviously speak for them because there's a number of people who feel that way. I just happen to disagree because I saw, when I was religious and I was in the military while I was a Christian, I would have wanted, while I was out in the middle of the Gulf, in the Gulf War, if something had happened, I would have wanted to talk to somebody as close to my own denomination as possible. It's impractical on for example, an aircraft carrier of 6,000 like I was on, to have a representative of every religion. And I mean, it's just absurd. And so you need the secular counselors who then can perhaps remove the chaplaincy, now that we're in this new age where we can Skype via satellites around the world, remove the chaplaincy entirely and have these counselors direct people to ministers who aren't in the military, to a representative of their religion, get them in touch with somebody. I think it'd be cheaper to even fly some of these individuals out on occasion, or give them a 48-hour pass and ship them home so they can talk to a minister if it's that serious and it's what they want to do, than it would be to continue paying a chaplaincy corps, who, by the way, never mind. I won't say anything too bad about them. But yeah, I would like to see it go away in stages.
Okay. Well, yeah, like I said, I enjoy your show, and I became an atheist about 5 or 6 months ago while I was still in seminary, my first year.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Fantastic. You got a good journey ahead of you. Hope you enjoy it.
Yes, yes.
Thanks a lot for calling.
I'm looking forward, Matt, to seeing you dress drag. It's going to be hilarious.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping it's not too funny, because I should be hot.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thanks a lot for the call.
Yep.
All right. We've got Dan in New York. How are you?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Pretty well.
All right. Actually, I just wanted to first say I'm a huge fan of you guys. Been watching for a little over 5 years now. You guys are doing great, and I wish you guys nothing but success.
Thanks.
But here in New York, I actually teach a moral dilemmas class at the local university in Long Island. And I recently turned on a lot of my students to your guys' show because I think that is actually a great show to actually receive these particular moral dilemmas, to have conversation in our class.
I need to write this down, because somebody else, they taught about us in their Sunday school class, so now our stuff's being taught in churches and universities around the world.
Well, I think you guys are, a great show to actually get these issues out there. I mean, whether it be religion or just morals and ethics in general, I think you guys are doing a great job.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
But what my question or maybe my statement would be, and maybe you guys could enlighten me with your thoughts. Teaching these young people, when we often come to these debates and conversations about religion or having to do with religion, it seems as though young people, as well as what I've come to believe, religious people, they don't have the ability to admit that they don't know, that it's so taboo for them to say, I don't know, that God is all-knowing, all-powerful, He knows, but why is it that we can't just say, I don't know?
I don't know.
There you go. At least you're able to admit that. But
I'll go for the
and there's an example. I don't think this is unique to Christians. I think everyone has that difficulty. Once they have studied something, or even if they've not studied something, they've come to a conclusion, and once they have reached that, it's a stretch for them to move from that position. And everyone has to go through that process. And particularly with received religion, or received truth, I guess, it's even more difficult for them, because they've been told this, it's been imposed on them, and they have accepted that without challenge, without it really thinking through it. And that's why it's difficult for them to move. But I don't think that Christians as a whole have any less intellectual facilities than the population as a whole. They just don't exercise it.
Oh, definitely. I completely agree with that. One of the issues that we spoke about in a recent class was the interview that you, Matt, had with Ray Comfort, and he was using the example that he doesn't have blind faith, which I found somewhat amusing. I'm sure you guys did as well.
That's very generous.
But what I don't understand is how a person of his stature and what his career is based upon, why is it that he is okay by saying he doesn't use blind faith and that he uses knowledge, when to people like you and myself, we know that he doesn't know. He has a pretty good idea that he does, but a personal experience isn't knowledge. So why is it that people use personal experience as knowledge when it isn't?
Well, I think one problem that I find that is prevalent among Christianity, well, religion in general. Religion does a very poor job of giving its adherents and its believers the proper intellectual tools to understand, like, how it is they know something, cognition, epistemology. How do you know what you really know? I don't think that religion, and particularly Christianity, and particularly if you are as arch-fundamentalist in your beliefs as someone like Ray Comfort is, you just haven't got the tools to understand, well, is this a fact? Is this simply something that I believe? Am I conflating my beliefs with facts? Am I mistaking my beliefs with facts? Am I saying knowledge when I really mean faith or hope? And that's what religion does. It can, religious faith is hope and desire mistaken for knowledge, and it's because the hope and desire is so strong that he finds it easy to make that conflation.
And the problem with dogma and received information like this is that they are deliberately discouraging people from reaching out and learning something other than what they want them to know. And the further down the spectrum you get in terms of the fundamentalist groups, the stronger that feeling is. There are, at the other end of the spectrum, there are Reformed Jews who are perfectly rational folks, and they understand the mythology of the Bible. They just are approaching it more in terms of a cultural thing and as an ethical thing, a way to get along in the world, rather than accepting a dogma that they can't challenge. So those are very rational people. Down at the other extreme, they're discouraged from being rational.
And two quick things on this subject. One, we already know that as soon as somebody publicly states a view of theirs, it cements it a little more firmly so that they are much more rigid and unlikely to change their mind, and much more likely to assert more knowledge than they have, or you're out there and now you're vulnerable. You've publicly stated you believe something, and when somebody challenges you, you're automatically defensive. The other thing is your question about personal experience and how it relates to knowledge. The reason this is a problem is because, by and large, in almost every other aspect of life, personal experience does end up becoming what we identify as knowledge. I saw this, and so you do an interpretation of your personal experience in consideration of all the other facts and information you have, and as long as it's consistent and you haven't identified any flaws, you kind of end up labeling that as knowledge, if not explicitly, then at least kind of colloquially, in the sense that I know this happened. So like this morning or today, Beth and I went for a drive in the car. This was a personal experience. I know that it happened. That happens the entire time that you're awake every day for your entire life. What you experience, by and large, becomes knowledge. And so when you experience something that's unusual, or when you experience something that somehow gets misattributed to a God or a Holy Spirit or anything like that, once you become convinced that you have attributed it correctly, it becomes indistinguishable from knowledge to the individual, and it takes a lot to overcome that. It wasn't easy for me to break through all that over the course of a couple of years, and there are plenty of people for which it would be harder. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, I really appreciate your input, and hopefully I get to call back one time and talk some more about these issues. But I'm sure you guys have plenty more callers to take. Hopefully you have some more crazy Christians or whoever else that could offer some more entertainment. But keep on keeping on, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
All right.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye.
Yeah. Don't forget to give all your students extra credit for watching us.
Yes.
That's...
Adam in Oklahoma, how are you?
Hey, Matt, I'm doing all right. How are you?
Good. You got a question for us?
I do. I just wanted to get your opinion on something. I'm not a crazy Christian, sorry.
Bye.
The question I had was, if we had a world free of religion, what would be the biggest benefits for everyone?
That is the base benefit. If we had a world free of cancer, what would be the benefit?
I can understand that, but I think the reason so many people cling to religion is they're afraid of what would happen if we didn't have it. So I think if they were able to hear it articulated well from someone like you, they could probably move past it. I know this being a little optimistic, but it would be a good start, I think.
Possibly. Yeah. The thing is, atheism isn't an ism. It doesn't offer anybody anything. It's just a rejection of claims that aren't true. So, well, that was a good way to phrase it. A rejection of claims that you do not consider to be true. And in my case, it's because they haven't demonstrated any reason to think they might be. Yeah. So what benefit do we get out of atheism? In my case, my atheism is the result of skepticism, and that's the real benefit. That is the tool set that allows you to evaluate reality, to determine which things are likely to be true, which things are not likely to be true, so that you can believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. And that is, I'm sorry to say, its own reward. I was only half joking when I said, compared it to the elimination of cancer.
But Adam, I think that if you're talking about trying to sell believers on the benefits of non-belief and accepting our worldview, part of it is they will lose their fear of the natural world. They will lose their fear of what's going to happen to them after they die. They will gain a greater self-confidence in what is their control of events around them. It's not driven by some snowy-haired white guy. Oh, wait a minute. Some invisible guy.
Are you him?
Some invisible guy in the sky that's coming down and throwing thunderbolts at them if they do something wrong. They lose that fear. They get free of all of those constrictions, restrictions that organized religion has placed upon them. It's not just a belief in God. It's all of the accoutrements that come with that, with structured religions that say you can do this, you cannot do this, you cannot eat pork, you can't sell liquor on Sunday, all those dumb things. That's the freedom that you would get if we did not have religion in the world.
Yeah, and of course, and the way in which religion has developed, particularly in a Western culture, right? I mean, there are a lot of religions out there, if you want to look at them, I mean, perfectly benign, right? I mean, people, nature-worshipping pagans or what have you, and they just, that's fine. But I know what you're getting at, which is one thing that religion does do very well. It doesn't necessarily do it with facts or honesty or truth, but it does, on an emotional level, is that it helps people manage really basic insecurities that we all have about life.
Right.
Why are we here? Where did I come from? What happens when I die? Is death going to be scary? Is it, all of these things, the big unknowns. As long as there are unknowns, and there will always be unknowns, there's going to be, I think, the God that people want to plug into those gaps that are the unknowns. And it's a way of putting a human face on the universe to make the universe a little less vast and empty and cold and scary and lonely. And so one thing, so it's difficult, and it's a common question I think we get, as as unbelievers, is like, but aren't you afraid of this, that, or the other? Yeah. Doesn't it, aren't we just racked with existential angst all day in and day out?
No.
And it's, but it is something that, you have to, it takes work.
Well,
and
the specific fear that Adam brought up was this fear of what would happen to the world we live in without religion. And to me, that is absolutely the religion as a crutch argument. Which isn't true for everybody. There's not everybody is religious because they fear what life would be like without it. But for those who are, I think that is absolutely a demonstration of a crutch, because I'm afraid to stop relying on this because I'm worried about what might happen if I don't. And in that case, I'd tell them to look around at all of the other people who have given it up, who are doing just fine, who are not running around raping and killing and burning things down and trying to destroy everything. We love the exact same things that they do. We enjoy the same pleasures and benefits in life, with some additional benefits of relieving ourselves of the angst that both of these guys mentioned.
Yeah. But of course, religions, I think, teach you to have that angst, right? I mean, they invent the problem,
Yes.
You know, you're a horrible, evil sinner. You were born into sin, and you're corrupt, and then they offer themselves as the solution. It's a very insidious thing that particularly the Christian religion does, is that it is all about beating down the self-esteem of the individual believer in order to reconstruct it in such a way that now the belief is at the center of the newly rebuilt self-esteem. So then that if it goes, everything else goes. And so that's why Christians are like, uh-oh, if I don't have this, I have nothing, because they have been taught that. And that's a hard bit of programming to undo.
And actually, we've got like a minute and some change or so before I have to stop this. So I'm going to go and let you go and try to get one more call in. Thanks a lot, Adam.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Sure. It's kind of along the same lines. Jeff in Honolulu, how are you?
Yeah, hey, how's it going, guys? Yeah, I was just going to basically just touch on that, too, was just that, you know, a lot of people, when I talk about this with Christians, they kind of have the same thing where they say, you know, it's good to have hope just in the belief of a God, not necessarily as a full having of a religion, but just having the hope that you can, you know.
Jeff, we're almost out of time. Let me get to this. What they posted that you said was that the idea that a world without a religion is dangerous. That you personally think that a small amount of religion is helpful. Is that right?
Yeah, maybe not religion, but just the belief in a God, because it can give you hope. Yeah.
Why do you what about that do you think is helpful that we would risk losing?
Well, I guess in the terms of like children, because you just get like children who are kind of in a bad situation. It gives them a small amount of hope that they're not alone. You know what I mean? I guess.
But you don't need a God for that. You can give them mentors. You can give them friends. You can give them they're all people in the community and schools, and there's so much in reality that can support children in that circumstance. You don't need to sell them on a different version of Santa or, you know, the Easter rabbit. That's,
and I also think that this idea of giving them false hope is potentially dangerous.
Yes.
Because when they finally discover that it wasn't true, now you're kind of screwed.
The farther you fall, yes.
You've lost credibility.
Yeah.
I have? I thought you were just telling me. Hey, we are absolutely out of time. I want to thank Nick Lee for coming down to the show. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
President of Atheist Alliance America. I almost gave you Dave's job. I've given me Dave's job before, too, I think on stage. But we'll be back again next week, or actually I won't be. Matilda Dillahunty will be here in my place. Thanks to the crew right there, and don't forget about coming down to El Arroyo if you'd like to have a drink.
I'll be at TAM 9 in Vegas, so say hi to me. We'll try to organize a little AETV get-together, a little meet-up if you're going. So,
and I'll be at the AAI convention in Houston in October.
As will we, I hope.
See you next week.
Toodles.